The European Union was planned long before the name was even mentioned, long before even the European Economic Community was mentioned. Goes way back. It involves the House of Rothschild, of course. If anything is happening of serious manipulation and conspiracy, then the House of Rothschild will be in there at operational level. And one of the other so-called elite families is the Habsburgs, and of course Otto von Habsburg has been involved in the manipulation of the European Union, is now for long before, like I say, it was ever mentioned. The idea is very simple. If you are the few and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making, you have to centralize power. The more points of decision making you have, the more diversity of decision making, the less power any small cabal is going to have at the center. So the idea has been over not just hundreds of years, but thousands of years, to incessantly centralize power, to centralize decision making. If you think back a little way, humanity was assembled, if you like, in tribes, where there were lots of tribes in these different areas of land, and the tribes were making decisions over what happened in the tribe. Then came the first major centralization operation, and that was when they turned large numbers of these tribes into different nations. And of course then you've got a situation where now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the previous tribes. What the European Union is, and of course they have plans for similar structures all over the world. Like they've got the African Union, they want the North American Union to be the American Union, they want the Asia Pacific Union. But the European Union is the blueprint. And this was the next stage where they started bringing the nations together under centralized control. So now a few literal bureaucrats in Brussels are dictating to the nations of Europe. The next stage from that is a world government which would dictate to the unions. And so as with all of these manipulations of society, you see the outcome at some point. Like now we've got this Lisbon Treaty and, you know, in effect a United States of Europe. But that's the outcome as it is at the moment. Actually, it started decades and decades and decades ago, way back in the early part of the 20th century, when all this thing was kind of orchestrated. And one of the, of course, major frontmen of the creation of the European community was Jean Monnet, who was just, and again, a frontman for these families, who was used as the orchestrator and the administrator into existence of this European economic community as it was. And he wrote to a friend in the year I was born. We're talking nearly 60 years ago, 57 years ago. And he was saying that the idea is not to tell anybody, basically, that this, what we want is a centralized superstate, in effect. But what we'll do is we'll keep incessantly moving towards that and give an economic excuse for why the different stages of more and more centralization are justified, until, as you put it, you basically pass a point where there's no return. And in effect, barring a colossal revolution, we are, in the present state of things anyway, past the point of no return. And it's just been a classic case of what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, where you start at A, you know you're going to Z, but you know if you go in gigantic leaps, then the change is so dramatic and quick that people look up and ask what's going on. So you make your leaps as much as you can get away with, but not so far that there's a big kind of reaction and acknowledgement that something very different is going on here. And they've done it brilliantly. But the way they played it in more recent times is to deny the public an opportunity to have a decision or make a decision in referendums, etc., on the incessant centralization of power that we've been seeing, because more and more people are beginning, in fact, well past beginning, to look at the European Union, the way it's going, and feel great unease about it. We saw this with the no votes for the Constitution in the Netherlands and in France, and that was a big wake-up call to the manipulators, because they realized that if you give people the opportunity to say yes or no to this creation of this United States of Europe, then overwhelmingly you're going to get a no. That is why they simply changed the name of the Constitution to the treaty and kept 98% or something of the Constitution in the treaty. It was an excuse, clearly, blatantly, obviously, not to have a rerun of the French and Dutch referendums, because they knew they would say no again, and not to have to give a referendum in the UK, where we would have massively said no, no question. The arrogance and the agenda of this cabal is such that public opinion is totally and utterly irrelevant. And if public opinion is going to say what you don't want it to say, then you do not give public opinion the chance to say it. In Ireland, of course, thanks to the Irish Constitution, they had to have a referendum on this treaty. And the Irish said no. What happens then is we can't call it something else, so we've got to get the Irish to turn over that decision. Now, you see, in a normal course of events, you have a referendum. The referendum decides, and everyone gets on with their lives. And if that referendum, that first one in Ireland, had have said yes to the treaty, that is exactly what would have happened. But as I've said many times over the years, if it's the agenda, it doesn't take no for an answer. And so you know when it's the agenda, because it will not accept the outcome of a public referendum. So we have the second one. What happens then is they go to town big time on all the areas they need to change to get a different vote. One of the things that happened in Ireland, outrageously, was the people that decide media policy and media balance policy and media bias policy in Ireland decided that in the second referendum, the television stations and the media didn't have to give equal time to the yes or no vote. They just had to give basically equal time to each party. And as only one party, Sinn Féin, was wanting to vote no, of course the massive yes vote got, Arena rather, got all the coverage. And to be honest, if that vote had not been genuinely no, and some people think it wasn't, then they would have made it so by manipulating the votes anyway, and manipulating the count, and because these people will not take no for an answer. So what we now have is a situation, outrageously, where a group of unelected bureaucrats in Brussels, appointed by other bureaucrats, controlled by the elite family network, are now going to decide on the policy and the structure of European society. And for those Irish people who genuinely voted yes to it, and those young people I saw jumping up and down with joy like a goal had been scored in a cup final when the vote came through yes. If you ever watch this, you people that did that, you are going to regret what you did for the rest of your life. Because what's going to happen now, we're already seeing it, Henrik, is once this power is secured, we've only got the check republic now to go through it, etc. We are going to see the speed of European central control just be unleashed. This European control system, as we speak, is like a series of 100-meter runners at the start of an Olympic 100-meter final. It's like, on your marks, get set, and now they're waiting. And as soon as this control system is through and this treaty is all intact, the gun's going to go off. And in all directions, massive centralization of power, dictatorship from the center is going to happen. We're going to see things like a European database where all the countries pull their database. We're going to see European laws, European law enforcement, etc., etc. And you people in Ireland, good on you who voted no, but you voted yes. Young people, I'm afraid the celebrations are going to be very short. Because you know what the Irish have done, those that voted yes? They voted to never have the option of voting again. Because what this means is, from now on, with the changes in the structure, we have literally a European government that has almost total power. And when you think that even now, before the treaty comes in, something like 75% of laws in the UK originate in the European Union, well, what's going to happen now? And it's been coming a long time, and some people have seen it, and some people have been watching the soap and the sports.
Speaking about law, the law text of the European Union, or the body of the law, acquis communautaire, or whatever, it's a French term, probably butchering that, but anyway, it contains about 80,000 pages of law, according to some sources. Then this UK think tank, which is critical of the European Union, called Open Europe, recently did a check on this and claimed that it actually is 170,000 pages long, the body of the law in the European Union. So with that, having said that, the New World Order pretty much is potentially not the crackdown that we first might have thought it was, with tear gas and tasers, batons, rubber bullets, what have you, advanced technology, so-called non-lethal weapons and so forth. Okay, that happens now and again, like in Pittsburgh, but generally it seems like the New World Order is more about rules, regulations, bylaws, do's and don'ts, ink and paper, and in a way, in the future panopticon, if you will, even to make a move or to be able to do something, you have to file a motion or turn in a paper or something like that. And that seems to be what is happening right now, that we're being entangled in this web of laws, pretty much. Maybe you can comment on that.
Well, the web of laws is a very good term, because I have an image that an artist friend of mine, Neil Haig, knocked out for me and produced for me, which I use in my talks, which is of a spider's web with the spider entangling human beings in the web. And it's a very good analogy, because what you're looking at is, in all areas of human activity, the do's and don'ts are coming closer and closer, becoming more and more fine detail. And the point is to tangle you to the web like a fly to the web, so you can't move. And of course, ludicrously detailed bureaucracy is part of that. I spoke in Croatia a couple of times in the last couple of years, who are in the process of negotiating entry to the European Union. And I was saying there that it's like tanks and troops all lining up on your border, and they're waiting to invade as soon as they're given the go-ahead, and then the invasion comes. But the point I was making is that invasion is not troops and it's not tanks, it's bureaucracy, it is laws, rules and regulations dictating the fine detail of your lives. And I was pointing out, you may think, oh yeah, join the European Union, it's everything good and everybody else is in it. Look, 1 year after Croatia joined, if that. They'll be going, we didn't agree to this. What's going on? European law, mate. Well, you can't do that. We've never done European law, mate. And this whole thing about legislation and law is very, very important, because what they do is, first of all, meanings of words are different in the way they are used in legislation than they're used in everyday life. Therefore, what appears to say something, if you read it, says something else in legalese. And the other thing is, as you point out from your question, is they explode these words and clauses and subclauses across pages and pages and pages of legislation, and the politicians who vote for it have never read it. We've got a guy in, this is just one example, it's a pathetic example, but it's a very good one, called Kenneth Clarke, who is in the Conservative Party and was in the Conservative government of Margaret Thatcher and others, who actually said openly on BBC Radio, while campaigning for the Maastricht Treaty, which was a big step towards where we are, he openly said on the radio that he'd not read the Maastricht Treaty. And so what happens is, and this is not just in the European Union legislation, it's done in all legislation, that they vote for it, and then something will happen. Oh, I didn't vote for that. Yeah. Oh, over here. Get your glasses on. Right. Look down here. Subclause 7, stroke 3. There it is. I voted for you. Voted for that. You didn't read it, but you voted for it. And this is one of the key reasons for political parties. It's an important area, this is. If we voted for people on the basis of their character, then there is no unifying force once they get to Parliament to get them to vote in blocks. So we don't want, in terms of this cabal, they don't want independent politicians. They had to find a way, they've long done it of course, of herding them together where they could be centrally controlled. So they introduced this whole idea of parties, a political version of the European Union. I guess if you look at its structure, you've now got a group of people who are answerable to a leader. And the leader then, and the leadership, and those in the shadows behind the leadership, dictate how all the people in that party, in a so-called democratic free country, are going to vote in relation to some legislation or other. And then there's the carrot and the stick, that if there's rebels who will not vote as the leadership says, then they know that their political careers in terms of rising up the ranks is going to be severely curtailed. Because they know that, the politicians in the party who are there for power, there for prestige, they're not there through values, they will toe the party line and vote for legislation they've not read, and even if they did, they didn't agree with, but they'll vote for it anyway. And so we have this system in Britain, the whip system, they have it in most other countries too, of course, where these guys from the parties go round and threaten people in their own party if they don't vote with the party line. So what this means is that we have this ludicrous idea that we live in a free country because of a democracy, as if freedom and democracy is the same thing, when actually the whole thing is stitched up so that people vote in the desired manner. And we need a totally different look and perception of how humans organize themselves, because at the moment they don't organize themselves. They're being organized from the center in an increasingly fierce and dictatorial way.
You touched a little bit on the Lisbon Treaty, obviously. The Irish voted yes. Either they were scared into submission because of the economic situation, which is happening right now, or maybe the 2.4 billion pro-European propaganda euros tax-funded, by the way. Maybe those worked its charm on the Irish people as well. And there's a number of things now that are going to be implemented under the Lisbon Treaty. And there's two things, maybe if you can comment on this. One of them is the death penalty in the EU, in the case of war, riots, and upheaval, whatever that actually means, upheaval. And also the potential upcoming future president, unelected president of the European Union. Some say Tony Blair, recently converted to Catholicism and all that, the whole background story on that guy, war criminal, liar.
If Tony Blair converted to humanity, it would be a start. He's not managed it yet.
What's your take on the implementation of the Lisbon Treaty and these things? Mentioned death penalty and Tony Blair. Do you think that they will be implemented and enforced? Do you think Tony will get in as well?
Well, I think that's the way it seems to be going. And different people like Sarkozy, who I wouldn't trust to tell me the time in a room full of clocks, and Berlusconi, both of which are close associates of Tony Blair because they're all in the cabal. They're pushing him, and Tony Blair is the classic frontman for this whole conspiracy because he has no values, he has no sense of decency, he has no empathy with the consequences for others of his actions. And wherever he has been in power, war has followed. The 10 years that he was in power as Prime Minister of Britain, he took the country into war after war in league with the United States. Both countries controlled by the House of Rothschild. That's why they move as one unit. And it's why Israel and Mossad move as one unit with America and Britain, because that's one of the great fiefdoms of the House of Rothschild. It's all comes back to them at operational level in the end. And so Tony Blair will implement anything that he's told to implement. He's the ultimate yes sir, no sir, anything you say, sir. And of course, at the moment, after his time as Prime Minister and before he probably becomes the President of Europe, he's had payback. He has been given enormous amounts of money for doing nothing in terms of advising JP Morgan Chase. Phenomenal amounts of money for sycophantic, bland, say-nothing speeches. And he's getting payback for services rendered when he was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and did whatever he was told. We had a situation when he was Prime Minister where even when members of the Cabinet resigned in various situations, sometimes in protest over the Iraq War, where they actually said there was no cabinet government in Britain because those in the shadows were basically making the decisions through Blair, and what the rest of the government decided or thought was irrelevant. And now, if he becomes the President of Europe, if you look at his track record, you look at the people behind him, you look at what the agenda is in terms of a third world war to complete the process to world government, world central bank, world army and all this stuff, he will take the European Union into a war. I mean, he knows no other way. And the very fact that this was pointed out to the Irish people, what you're voting yes for is almost certainly this valueless, lying cheat to become, in effect, your head of state. And they still voted yes. Turkey's voting for Christmas. And Christmas is coming, by the way.
One of the things that kind of I'm currently working on, so to speak, in terms of the film that we're working on, is a theory rather at this point. Some of the evidence seems to point out that the European Union is basically the recreation of the Roman Empire, or the Holy Roman Empire, pretty much.
Yep.
The Lisbon Treaty documents, once they are signed, are, for instance, they're lodged in Rome. The major step forward in the EU back in '57 was, of course, the signing of the Treaty of Rome.
Yeah.
Tony Blair converted to Catholicism, again, potentially becoming the first president. Otto von Habsburg, the Pan-European Union, seems to favor a Catholic, or at least a Christianized, anti-capitalist European Union.
Based on the Constantine
creed, or
the Constantine time, where of course Constantine the Great was the head of the Holy Roman Empire, which is, you're quite right, they want to create. And Otto von Habsburg even uses the name Constantine when he's talking about what he would like the European Union to become. And he wants a president for life, not just a president for a specific number of years.
And continuing on from that, many of the so-called founding fathers of the EU, you mentioned Monnet before, Robert Schuman, Konrad Adenauer, Joseph Beck, Alcide de Gasperi, Paul Henry Spaak. They've all been in some kind of accordance with Christian Democrats, Christian Social Democrats, or Catholics. Some of them are Jesuit trained and so forth. So to you, is that evidence that at the core the European Union is going to be Vatican/Catholic, or is rather a creation of the Catholic background, and Vatican basically is behind it? Is that what you see as well, or do you have any else to add to that or comment on?
Well, Rome is the center of so much, and there's a good reason for that. When these network of interbreeding bloodlines came out of ancient Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, Sumer, Babylon, at least one stream of them, and their priesthood is the secret society network through which they operate, relocated to Rome and created the Roman Empire. Of course, it created the Christian Church. But the Christian Church, the Roman Church, and now the Roman Catholic Church, was the Church of Babylon relocated. And the holy days of the Church of Babylon, or the holy days of the Church of Rome, just use different names. The Roman Church Trinity of Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is another version of the Babylonian Trinity of Nimrod, Tammuz, the virgin-born son, and Queen Semiramis, Ishtar, the goddess of Babylon. And they symbolized Queen Semiramis in Babylon as a dove, and they symbolized the Holy Ghost in the Christian Trinity as a dove, which is the goddess. And what they also did was take all the attributes that the Babylonians gave to Queen Semiramis, Ishtar, like the Queen of Heaven, Virgin Queen, great, all this stuff, and they gave them to Mother Mary. So the Roman Church is the Church of Babylon. That's what we're looking at. And so it is in many ways, so many ways, the core of it all. And that's why the Jesuits and Opus Dei and all these people are so influential in this whole network of manipulation. Also influential, of course, you've got the Knights of Malta, used to be called the Knights Hospitaller of St. John of Jerusalem, again, allied to Rome. You've got the Knights Templar, again, connected to Rome. And so, yes, that's a massive vortex of control and manipulation. And it's no accident, as you rightly point out, that we have the Treaty of Rome and all these things within the European Union. And London is another major operational centre. But, Rome is massive. And it is a recreation in so many ways of the Roman Empire. Because people don't realise that, the Roman Empire is supposed to be from history, but our very laws are created on the Roman system. You look at the architecture of Washington, D.C., you look at the architecture of major buildings in London, like the Bank of England and so on and so forth, and you're looking at Rome, and Rome never went away. It just changed the way it operated, went underground rather than in your face. And we're actually seeing, Henrik, almost a cycle being completed now, because there was a point where people were rebelling against overt, in-your-face dictatorship, i.e. royal diktat, kings and queens dictating everything. They rebelled about that, and that this was a problem for the control system, the emerging control system. So they had to start to do it another way, and they did it by moving these elite bloodlines, although they kept some in the royal families like we have in Britain, etc. But most of them went into what I call the dark suit professions and introduced this thing called democracy. And they had politicians which appeared to be voting in relation to what people wanted, and they were being elected by people. And then you had the corporations, and you had all these other things, all these dark suit professions of this cabal, and their agents and gophers were running this system. And for a long time, they ran it because they had to, as if people were free, and they equated freedom with democracy, which is just dictatorship by the majority, or even dictatorship by the minority in many countries. And people bought that. But what we're now seeing is the movement getting ever faster, to the point where people are beginning to see again, as you know from your program, and I know from traveling the world and talking and researching this, more and more people are beginning to see again, actually, we're being controlled. It's almost like it's a return to, we're not having kings and queens dictating to us just because of their bloodline. And now people are starting to realize, hold on a second, in a different form, that's happening.